War is a very profitable business. Share prices of the big European defence companies have been booming. Investors are pouring money into the defence sector, and the reason? European governments are ramping up military spending, even as public services remain under tight budget constraints. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has committed to increasing the UK's defence budget to 2.5% of GDP, eventually going up to 3%, following pressure from the United States and growing geopolitical uncertainty. Across Europe, political leaders are making similar pledges, ensuring that the private defence industry will continue to thrive. And thrive it will, because in this system, war isn't just a crisis, it's a business opportunity. This is the Ministry of Defence. I think we have to ask the question, is defence really the right word? Or should we call it what it is, the Ministry of War? When does defence become aggression? When does security justify destruction? The language of governments softens the reality, but behind these walls, the business of war is being conducted at full speed. For decades, European countries maintained relatively modest military budgets, with many failing to meet NATO's 2% spending target. But the war in Ukraine and the threat of an increasingly unstable global order have changed the narrative. Political leaders now justify defence budget increases as a necessity. Meanwhile, companies producing weapons and military equipment see their profits skyrocket. The irony is stark. Public sectors in the UK and across Europe are facing severe cuts. Hospitals are underfunded, schools are struggling, welfare support is being slashed, including the pensioners' winter fuel allowance. Yet, when it comes to military spending, the purse strings are magically loosened. Governments that claim they can't afford to fully fund social services somehow find billions to invest in the military-industrial complex. Let's just acknowledge that the UK's most recent military interventions have not exactly been a success. UK involvement in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, they were all costly failures, achieving neither stability nor security. Despite these repeated failures, the government continues to prioritise military spending, raising the question that if war doesn't work, why keep funding it? Who really benefits from this priority given to military spending? The public is told that increased defence spending is for security, but the real winners are the private companies manufacturing the weapons. After European leaders met in Paris a little while back to discuss defence, markets immediately decided there was going to be a boom in the war industry. In one day, Rheinmetall shares jumped 14%, BAE Systems were up 9%, and Thales climbed 7.8%. European defence stocks are at their highest levels in decades, driven not by actual conflicts but by the expectation of future wars. This raises ethical questions that investors have long struggled with. For years, many were hesitant to back defence companies due to concerns about profiting from war. But the Russian invasion of Ukraine has changed that calculation. Now defence stocks are seen as a safe bet, a necessity in an increasingly unstable world. The result? The financialisation of war. Killing is now just another market trend, dictated by shareholder interests and geopolitical speculation. The reality is that the defence industry thrives on instability. Companies like Rheinmetall openly talk about the need to scale up production to compete with American arms giants. Their CEO recently told the Financial Times, to meet the high demand in Europe, we need arms production on an industrial scale. This is not a sector designed for peace. It needs war, or at least the constant threat of war, to maintain its profits. Every new geopolitical crisis, every government commitment to rearmament sends stock prices soaring. Investors aren't betting on stability, they're betting on prolonged conflict. This isn't just an abstract financial discussion. Every pound spent on expanding military budgets is a pound not spent on public services. The UK is still grappling with an NHS in crisis, an underfunded education system, and growing economic inequality. Yet somehow, there's always money for new weapons contracts. Starmer claims that the government will spend £13.4 billion a year more on defence. In comparison, the winter fuel payment cuts are saving £1.5 billion a year, and ending the two-child benefit cap would cost £2.5 billion a year. Old people have spent the winter cold, millions of children are in poverty. This could be significantly alleviated. £4 billion would dramatically improve the situation for pensioners and children. Yet we can't afford it, but we can afford £13.4 billion for defence. What's going on here? This prioritisation is not accidental. The defence industry has immense lobbying power. It shapes government policies to ensure continued investment, and the result? A political landscape where military spending is untouchable, while social spending is always up for debate. But let's go deeper. Can war ever be morally justified? Can it ever be consistent with humanistic or spiritual principles? Can we justify killing while claiming to be moral, humanistic, or even religious? Every major spiritual tradition, from Buddhism to Christianity, teaches that life is sacred. Yet in modern geopolitics, we somehow rationalise destruction as a necessity. Now, full disclosure, I'm a pacifist. I believe in peace and love. I believe that there's always a solution that doesn't involve violence. No dispute ever needs to involve violence, but it does require a commitment to love and peace. And just because that's difficult doesn't mean that we shouldn't aspire to that. Defence is framed as protection, but at what cost? Are we actually defending ourselves, or are we feeding a system that thrives on conflict? And if we claim to be civilised, how do we justify profiting from war? These aren't just economic or political questions, they're ethical and spiritual ones. The government says that the increased spending will sustain our globally competitive industry, supporting highly skilled jobs and apprenticeships across the whole of the UK. In 2023-24, defence spending by the UK government supported over 430,000 jobs across the UK, the equivalent to 1 in every 60. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not comfortable with boasting about our global competitive industry in such dubious products. It's time to ask the question, is this really the future we want? A world where security is measured in weapons contracts, where peace is a slogan used to justify ever-expanding military budgets? Or do we dare to imagine something different, a world where security means something more than stock prices and arms deals? No one in the press and media is asking these questions. I'm not saying that everyone should think what I think, but shouldn't we at least have some debate about it? These are uncomfortable truths, but they need to be confronted, because if we don't, we'll continue to live in a world where the business of war is booming at the cost of everything else. If you got something out of this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.